He hadn't seen his ex-wife in years, but finding her sitting on the floor, dejected and with eyes full of shame, something inside him broke. The millionaire, once cold and ruthless, extended his hand and simply said, "Come, let's get something to eat." If you enjoy emotional dramas, subscribe to the channel and comment now from where you are listening. Continuing. Edward Miller stepped out of the gilded elevator of the Plaza Hotel, adjusting his Italian tie. The sound of his footsteps echoed on the marble as a small crowd of advisors followed him, whispering numbers and strategies. Cameras flashed, capturing every move of the businessman who had just closed another million-dollar deal. At 52, Edward commanded an empire that stretched from agribusiness to construction companies, from New York City to Los Angeles, leaving his mark on shopping malls, luxury condominiums, and commercial towers that pierced the New York City skyline. That Thursday afternoon, his agenda included a protocol visit to the Harlem Community Center, part of an image campaign his advisor, Patricia, had meticulously orchestrated. 3 minutes of presence, a few photos, and that's it, she had explained in the car. People love to see businessmen helping the community, but when Edward crossed the simple door of the center, painted a faded blue, something inside him hesitated. The contrast was brutal. Outside, his armored BMW waited with the air conditioning on. Inside, ceiling fans spun lazily, fighting the March heat. The smell of brewed coffee and fresh paint hung in the air, mixed with the distant sound of children singing. It was then that he saw her. Sitting on the corridor floor, leaning against the whitewashed wall, was Marina. Her brown hair, once always styled in the salons of the Upper East Side, now fell naturally over her shoulders. She held an insulated lunchbox on her lap and had her shoes beside her, massaging her bare feet with slow, tired movements. She wore a simple cotton blouse and a knee-length skirt, clothes Edward had never seen her wear in their 15 years of marriage. Time froze. The advisors continued talking, the cameras continued clicking, but Edward could only see Marina. She looked up and found him standing there in a $3,000 suit, surrounded by important people, and smiled. A small, calm smile, without surprise or embarrassment, as if she knew that moment would arrive sooner or later. "Marina." His voice came out lower than he intended. "Hi, Edward." She didn't get up. She just waved with her free hand, like someone greeting a neighbor on the street. The advisors stopped talking. Patricia frowned, trying to understand who this woman was, capable of destabilizing the man who showed no emotion, even when closing $100 million contracts. The cameras turned to Marina, curious, sniffing out a story behind that encounter. Edward felt a pang in his chest, as if someone had tightened a knot inside him. It was compassion, yes, but also something heavier, guilt. Marina was there, on the cold floor of a community center, while he had just left a lunch that cost more than many families earned in a month. The woman who had helped him build the first steps of his empire, who had stayed by his side during the late nights at the small diner they opened together in New York City more than 20 years ago. "How are you?" Edward asked, taking a few steps closer. "Fine." Marina began to put on her shoes, her movements calm and determined. "Very well, actually. You work here." "I coordinate the children's choir, 3 times a week." She stood up, adjusting her skirt. "The children are incredible. You should hear them sing." Edward looked around. The corridor was simple but clean. Colorful posters decorated the walls, showing children's drawings and motivational phrases written with markers. "Marina, if you need anything." "I need nothing, Edward." The answer came quickly, but without harshness. It was just a fact. "Thank you for your concern." He swallowed hard. In the 20 years since the divorce, he had imagined this reunion hundreds of times. He always saw himself as magnanimous, generous, perhaps even apologizing, but he never imagined she would dismiss him with such serenity. "Marina, I know that things weren't easy after." Edward gestured vaguely, searching for words. "If you'd like, we could have dinner. Talk. It's been a long time since." "I can't tonight." Marina raised the lunchbox, showing it to him. "I already have someone to eat with." At that moment, a child's voice shouted from the end of the corridor, "Aunt Marina! Aunt Marina! Everyone's waiting!" A girl of about 8 appeared running, her sneakers slapping on the polished concrete floor. She stopped beside Marina and looked Edward up and down, without disguising her curiosity. "Is this the rich man who's coming to help us?" the girl asked, with the brutal sincerity of children. Marina chuckled softly and ran her hand through the girl's hair. "This is Edward, Julia, an old acquaintance." "Oh," Julia seemed disappointed. "I thought he was the millionaire Grandma said was going to donate money to the choir." Edward felt his face flush. Marina just smiled at the girl and said, "Come on, sweetie. Everyone's waiting for your mum's lunchbox." They started walking down the corridor. Edward stood still, watching them move away. Marina didn't look back. Julia, however, turned and waved at him, shouting, "Bye, rich man!" Patricia appeared beside Edward, whispering urgently, "Who is she? I need to know if she's going to be a problem for our image." Edward didn't answer. He was mesmerized by the way Marina walked, the lunchbox swinging gently in her hands, her steps confident on the uneven floor. She disappeared into a room at the end of the corridor, from which children's voices began to sing a song he didn't recognize. "Mr. Miller," Patricia insisted, "the cameras are waiting. We need the photos and the statements." Edward sighed deeply and turned to his advisor. "Cancel everything. Let's go." "Cancel? What do you mean? You have an appointment with the mayor at 5D and then—" "Cancel, Patricia. Everything." On the way back to the car, Edward couldn't stop thinking about Marina's refusal. "I already have someone to eat with." The words echoed in his head like a sentence. Why did it bother him so much? He, who refused state dinners, who dismissed ministers and ambassadors, couldn't understand why the rejection from that simple woman, sitting on the floor of a community center, hurt him more than any no he had ever heard in boardrooms. That night, in his penthouse apartment on the Upper East Side, Edward stood on the balcony looking at the New York harbor. He called Camilla, his fiancée of 2 years, a 28-year-old model and influencer who collected followers as he collected companies. "Honey, you disappeared today," Camilla said, her voice husky from having spent the afternoon at the spa. "Patricia said you cancelled everything." "I had an unforeseen event." "What kind of unforeseen event?" Edward hesitated, how to explain that a 3-minute encounter with an ex-wife had turned his day upside down. "Family matters." "Oh." Camilla immediately lost interest. Family, to her, was a boring topic. "Well, since you're free, how about dinner at the Fasano? I posted a new photo and I want you to appear with me." Edward hung up without answering. Camilla wouldn't protest. She was used to his silences, his abrupt decisions, the way he simply disappeared when something bothered him. It was part of the package of dating a millionaire. But Marina wasn't like that. Marina asked questions, demanded answers, didn't accept silences as explanations. Marina had known him when he was just a 25-year-old kid, with a crazy idea of opening a diner in New York City, with no money or experience. She had suggested the first dishes. She had convinced her mother to lend the large pots. She had stayed late helping to do the accounts in the graph paper notebook they bought at the corner stationery store. Edward went to his office and opened the drawer where he kept old documents. There was the first certificate of the diner, registered only in his name. Marina had never complained about it. "The businessman has to be you," she had said at the time. "I just want it to work out." It worked out, more than she could ever imagine. The diner became a restaurant. The restaurant became a chain. The chain became a holding company. And Marina had been left behind, lost amidst meetings, trips, social events, and an ambition that grew faster than the love between them. The divorce had been silent, almost bureaucratic. Edward kept everything. Marina left with only a few clothes and the old yellow Volkswagen Beetle they used to buy ingredients at the local wholesale market. He didn't even fight against it. At the time, he thought he was being generous by not asking her for alimony. Now, 20 years later, looking at the city lights he had helped shape with his ventures, Edward understood that Marina didn't need his charity. She had found something he was still looking for, peace, and that, in some way, haunted him more than any financial crisis he had ever faced. The following days were silent torture for Edward. He tried to focus on meetings, reports, decisions that moved millions, but the image of Marina sitting in that corridor wouldn't leave his head. During a lunch with Japanese investors, He caught himself unconsciously drawing an insulated lunchbox on the margin of the contract. Patricia watched him worriedly, whispering to the other advisors that the boss was not at his best. The following Monday, Edward made a decision. Without telling anyone, he instructed his financial team to make anonymous donations to the Harlem Community Center. $50,000 for renovations, $20,000 for musical equipment, $15,000 for food. Total discretion, he emphasized. No one can know it came from me. But the discretion lasted exactly 48 hours. The news leaked from somewhere within the company itself. On Wednesday, the New York Times front page read, "Businessman Edward Miller makes $1 million donation to ex-wife in vulnerable situation." The article, signed by an economics reporter Edward didn't even know, painted a touching portrait of the magnate who, moved by Christian compassion, was helping the woman who sacrificed her own career to support his first steps in the business world. Edward's phone wouldn't stop ringing. Journalists wanted interviews. Politicians wanted photos. Camilla herself called, euphoric. "Honey, you're a trending topic. Everyone's talking about your generosity. My Instagram gained 15,000 followers today alone." But Edward was nauseated. The article spoke of Marina as if she were a wounded animal he had rescued from the gutter. Ex-wife in vulnerable situation. The words burned him inside. Marina, vulnerable. The woman who coordinated a choir, who walked with dignity, who refused his dinner invitation with the tranquility of someone who owed nothing to anyone. On Thursday morning, Patricia entered his office with a pile of newspapers. "Edward, you need to see this. It's become a social responsibility case study. The Ford Foundation wants to honor you. The United Way wants a partnership. Your image has never been better." Edward flipped through the headlines in silence. "Millionaire acknowledges debt to humble ex-wife." Edward Miller, an example of gratitude and humility. Businessman rescues one who helped him grow. Every word was like a slap in his conscience. That's when Claude, his driver of 15 years, knocked on the door. "Mr. Miller, there's a lady downstairs who wants to speak with you. Says her name is Marina." Edward's heart pounded. "Send her up." "She said she prefers you come down." Edward descended 27 floors in an elevator that seemed to move forever. He found Marina standing on the sidewalk in front of the building, holding a folded newspaper under her arm. She wore the same simple clothes from the community center, but there was something different in her eyes. A coldness he didn't recognize. "Marina! Did you read it?" She unfolded the newspaper and showed him the headline. "Marina, I swear it wasn't intentional. I instructed the donations to be made in secret, but someone—" "I am not your cause, Edward." Her voice was low, controlled, but sharp as a blade. "I am not your clean conscience ornament, nor your redemption story to impress a magazine." Edward looked around. Pedestrians hurried past, some glancing discreetly in their direction. 2 building security guards watched from a distance, ready to intervene if necessary. "Come in. Let's talk in my office." "No." Marina took a step back. "I don't need to sit in your leather chair to say what I came to say." She took a deep breath, like someone preparing to dive into deep waters. "You want to know the truth. I sleep well, Edward. Every night. I know how much I have in my wallet. I know what I'll eat tomorrow. I know the choir children are waiting for me on Tuesday and Thursday. I have few friends, but they are true. I have little money, but it's mine. Do you understand the difference?" Edward tried to speak, but she interrupted him with a wave of her hand. "This money you sent, I will return it, every cent, not because I don't need it, but because I don't want it. I don't want to be the poor wretch you saved. I don't want people to look at me and see your charity. I am someone who lives with what I have and sleeps peacefully with what I do." Marina's words echoed in the air like a slap in Edward's face. He stood there, on the Park Avenue sidewalk, wearing a suit that cost more than a minimum wage, feeling smaller than ever. "Marina, I just wanted... I know what you wanted." She folded the newspaper again and put it in her bag. "You wanted to feel good about yourself. You wanted to think you were making up for something. But you know what, Edward? Some things can't be made up for with money. Some things are made up for by changing." She started to walk away, but stopped and turned one last time. For the first time in 20 years, You had the chance to see me as I really am. Not the woman you abandoned, not the poor ex-wife, but the person I've become. And you wasted it. Marina disappeared into the street crowd, leaving Edward alone with his security guards and his shame. He went back up to his office like a ghost, ignoring Patricia's calls, urgent emails, decisions awaiting his signature. That afternoon, sitting in the swivel chair from which he commanded his empire, Edward understood something he had never realized before. All those years, he had called his donations, his public gestures, his social responsibility campaigns generosity, but Marina had been surgical in defining what it truly was: control. He didn't want to help Marina. He wanted to control her. He wanted her to be grateful, to depend on him, to look at him with the admiration he no longer saw anywhere. He wanted to turn her into another one of his projects, another success story he could tell in interviews. But Marina was not a project. She was a person who had found something all his money couldn't buy: dignity. As the sun set over New York Harbor, Edward made a decision. He picked up the phone and called his legal team. "I want to cancel all donations to the Harlem Community Center, all of them, and I want you to draft a statement explaining that it was a press misunderstanding." On the other end of the line, the lawyer hesitated. "Mr. Miller, this could cause an image crisis. The press will want to know why." "Because I made a mistake," Edward replied, "and mistakes are corrected, not covered up." That night, Edward dined alone in his apartment, looking at the city lights he had helped build. Camilla had sent messages complaining about his disappearance. Patricia had left 15 voicemails about the image crisis, and the newspapers were already speculating about the reason for the businessman's change in stance. But for the first time in months, Edward was able to sleep without needing the sleeping pill he kept in his bedside table drawer. Because for the first time in a long time, he had done something Marina would approve of. He had respected her choice. And at the Harlem Community Center, as the choir children rehearsed for their end-of-month performance, Marina smiled discreetly as she read the retraction Edward had ordered published in all the newspapers. It wasn't an apology. It was something much better. It was an acknowledgement that she had the right to be respected, and that Marina knew was just the beginning of a transformation that Edward would still take a long time to fully comprehend. End of story. Dear listeners, we hope Edward and Marina's story has deeply touched your hearts. If you were moved by this journey of reunion, pride, and dignity, please leave a like, subscribe to our channel, and share in the comments which moment resonated with you the most. Every day, we bring intense stories like this, revealing the most human and true side of relationships, showing that not every happy ending is about returning to what was, but about discovering what truly matters. Thank you for joining us, and we'll meet in the next episode with another story that goes straight to the heart.